Hello folks, and welcome to Jack Reviews Musicals. If this is your first time seeing my face, my name is Jack and I am a musical theater superfan based in St. Louis, Missouri. And this is my YouTube channel where I share my thoughts on all of the musical productions that I go out to see, or in this case, invited to see. The folks at Tesseract Theatre explicitly invited me to go out and see their production of the musical Anastasia, which is currently playing at the Marcelle Theatre from now until November 24th of 2024. It's the first time in the history of the channel that a theater company has explicitly contacted me to go out to see one of their productions. So with this in mind, I have set up an official business account, jackreviewsmusicals@gmail.com, that you are more than welcome to contact me with any business inquiries. I even got a haircut for the occasion. Thank you so much, Tesseract Theatre, for inviting me to see Anastasia. Your generous support and investment in the future of Jack Reviews Musicals is greatly appreciated. So Tesseract's production of Anastasia is actually a thrilling prospect because they've been operating in St. Louis for about 15 years now, and before the pandemic, they have mainly been doing straight plays. They still do, regional premieres, lesser-known shows, pieces that are kind of small scale, but post-COVID, they have been doing musical productions and shows that are a bit more larger scale. And in 2023, Tesseract produced their largest scale musical yet with Kinky Boots, presenting it in the beautiful Grand Duchess Theatre in Gaslight Square, paying homage to the original Broadway production, with Broadway caliber staging. You can read my review of that show on jackreviewsmusicals.com. And now in 2024, they have followed up Kinky Boots in terms of scale with Anastasia. But instead of mounting it in a larger space like the Grand Duchess Theatre, they're doing it in the Marcelle, one of the smallest venues in St. Louis. And traditionally, Anastasia is performed as this extravagant spectacle with a huge cast and just a big budget production. But at Tesseract, they shrunk the cast by half, reduced the orchestrations to just a simple symphonic combo, and was more visually minimal. Brittany Gunn and Kevin Corpuz, the creative directors for Tesseract Theatre, stated that they wanted to mount Anastasia as a challenge, to see how they can transform this giant epic into an intimate story, while also being on par with the rest of their more intimate body of work. And as an experiment, folks, I fear that Tesseract may have cooked with this one. So for the few of you who do not know the context of this, Anastasia is the stage musical adaptation of the 1997 musical movie of the same name. 1997, the year I was born. You're old. The film was made by 20th Century Fox, and not Disney.
Disney didn't make Anastasia.
The film was co-directed by Gary Goldman and Don Bluth, who in my opinion is one of the greatest animation directors of the late 20th century. And the movie had a pretty stacked cast. Meg Ryan, John Cusack, Christopher Lloyd, Kelsey Grammer, Hank Azaria, Bernadette Peters, and the late Angela Lansbury. The songs for the film were created by Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens, the composers of Ragtime, and the two of them returned to collaborate for the new stage adaptation, alongside their Ragtime book writer Terrence McNally. The film itself was actually based on the 1952 stage play of the same name by Marcel Moret, which in turn was adapted into a 1956 live-action film starring Ingrid Bergman, Yul Brynner, and Helen Hayes. However, the adaptation into animation was, for a lack of a better word, Disneyfied. Anastasia is an alternative history narrative based around the legend of the Russian Grand Duchess Anastasia Romanov, who was for the longest time rumored to be the sole survivor of the massacre of the Romanov family in 1918 at the hands of the Bolsheviks during the Russian Revolution. In the animated film, in order to make it more kid-friendly, it was retold that Russian mystic and royal advisor Grigory Rasputin placed a curse on the Romanov family before his death, and then he returned to Earth as a zombie after it is seen that Anastasia survived into adulthood so that he can unalive her himself. So seeing as they had no constraints really in adapting it for the stage, Terrence McNally elected to steer closer to the original stage play, grounding it more in reality and keeping it more focused on staying true to Russian history, even though it is still speculative. Instead of Rasputin, the antagonist here is Gleb Vaganov, a Bolshevik officer who is assigned to patrol the city of St. Petersburg, now known as Leningrad, under the communist regime of the Soviet Union. The year now is 1927. The citizens of Leningrad are under protest because they are worse off now under communism than they were when Russia was an empire. But what keeps the people afloat are the rumors that the Grand Duchess Anastasia is still alive, even after 10 years since the Romanovs were executed. But Anastasia is not the last Romanov. We also have the Dowager Empress Maria Fyodorovna, Anastasia's grandmother. She actually moved to Paris during the revolution before her family was murdered. And the Anastasia rumors have become so widespread that the Empress is offering a handsome reward to anyone who can find Anastasia dead or alive, which inevitably has led to a lot of con artists claiming to have found her and imposters claiming to be her. Now, going back to Gleb for a bit, the Anastasia rumors, even though they are ridiculous, they are something that Gleb takes very seriously, because the Bolsheviks are determined to do everything in their power to ensure that the Romanov family stays dead and gone. Anyone who is caught participating in this conspiracy will be given a word of warning, and then if they persist, they are either sent to a gulag or worse, killed. Two such con artists are Dmitri, a young orphaned man, and Vlad Popov, a former member of the Romanov court. The two of them are desperate to escape Russia, so they form their own Anastasia conspiracy by plucking from off the street an urchin named Anya. She's a young woman who was orphaned with amnesia as a girl. She has absolutely no idea who she was in her previous life. And so, seeing their opportunity, Dmitri and Vlad teach Anya the ways of the Romanovs, even setting up shop in the family's long-abandoned palace. But as time goes on, as Anya is spending more time in the palace, and as she's learning more about Anastasia, learning more about the Romanovs, she starts regaining her memories from her childhood. And increasingly, the memories become so vivid that eventually Anya, as well as Dmitri and Vlad, become convinced that she is actually the real Grand Duchess Anastasia. So once Anya's mind becomes unlocked like magic, her, Dmitri, and Vlad run off to Paris. They're going to find the Dowager Empress and reunite her with Anya, but little do they know, the Empress has actually just given up her search out of frustration, and the stakes are raised even higher because Gleb is now hot on the trio's trail for attempting to reignite the Romanov family line. It is very easy to see why Tesseract would want to produce Anastasia. Even though it is an epic show with a grand scale, it's also a deeply heartfelt story about what it means to find yourself, discover who you really are as a person, while you're also living in a world where it is so easy to lose your sense of self-worth, your own identity, what makes you unique as a person. It's a theme that is very resonant with young American adults today, myself included. It's even the reason why the animated film became so beloved. I guess you could say that Tesseract really has a knack for tapping into the psychology of people like me. You can click on the card in the top right corner of the video if you want to see me go more in depth about that. But that's not the only reason Anastasia is so effective. Just like every musical theater score they have ever composed, the songs by Stephen Flaherty and Lynn Ahrens are beautiful. Their songs run a pretty impressive gamut. They're light and fun, like A Rumor in St. Petersburg. They're dark and haunting, like Once Upon a December. And they're even deeply romantic and forlorn, like Journey to the Past. Now, all of these songs were retained from the movie, in addition to a few others, but there were 16 new songs added to the stage version. And every single one actually fits in perfectly with the musical vocabulary established in the movie. We've got The Neva Flows, which is an excellent villain song for Gleb. Close the Door, which makes the Dowager Empress's grief so palpable. And we also have the Act 2 ensemble number, The Land of Yesterday, which is just this full-out party from beginning to end that you just don't want to stop. Now, criticism has been levied against Anastasia because the songs are so tonally inconsistent from the darkness of the story, but I think we have to consider it from the point of view that Anastasia is a piece of speculative fiction meant for family audiences. Of course, it's going to be very Disneyfied, so the stage version has to be consistent with that vision. But make no mistake, Anastasia can get pretty dark, but if it just encompassed itself in that darkness, like fully immersed itself in it, then the journey of self-discovery that Anya goes through wouldn't be as thrilling or effective for us. Tesseract's mission as a theater company is to produce shows like this that contain these very human, universal themes, so they understand what makes Anastasia tick. And it's this understanding, this thoughtfulness, that allowed them to scale the production down and actually use their limitations as assets, just focusing on what is there in the material. Now, what is there is a pretty large story, so the director of the production, Brittany Gunn, she had to stage this show like a perpetual motion machine, one where every single part needs its utmost attention, and all of the cast and crew paid that attention. Brittany Gunn's directing here was extremely meticulous. Like, you get a sense watching it that everyone involved was on the same page. There was not a single weak link here. The enthusiasm that everyone holds for this production is infectious. The choreography by Michelle Sauer is super tight. It's incredibly energetic dancing that is on par with any Broadway show. There's traditional Russian dance steps in The Last Dance of the Romanovs. There's swing dancing in Paris Holds the Key. There's even a delightful mix of both Russian dancing and swing in The Land of Yesterday. And there are even full-on ballet sequences in Once Upon a December and Quartet at the Ballet. Michelle Sauer's choreography, combined with Brittany Gunn's staging, the intense fight choreography by Kevin Corpuz, and the seamless intimacy direction by Hannah Lohmeyer made the movement thrilling to watch. The musical direction by Zach Newman, top of the line. He directed the cast and the band to deliver this truly sumptuous score with aplomb. The harmonies and the solos were gorgeous to listen to, and the orchestrations were, at turns, wistful and sparkling. Both the singing and the music were expertly balanced by sound designer Philip Evans. Zach Newman leads the 7-piece symphonic combo with himself on piano, Brad Martin on percussion, Chuck Evans on violin, Paul Rushoff on cello, John Gerdes on the brass instruments, as well as Leah Gerdes and Joseph Hendricks on the reeds. Now, I talked about this production being very minimalist, and what sold that concept was the visual style. Even walking into the venue gives you that impression. Scenic designer Todd Schaefer completely transforms the Marcelle Theatre into the abandoned Romanov Palace. There's white marble and gold columns, there's archways and benches that are ornately built and painted. The columns and the benches roll across the stage to switch between the different locations. The benches are used as a chest, a bed, and there's covers on the benches that actually flip over to reveal seat cushions for when they're on the train and at the opera. The scenic design actually does make the show seem like it is being performed inside the palace, or rather, it's being performed by our own memories of Anastasia, of the Romanovs, of 1920s Russian history. It actually plays very well into the show's theme of the simultaneous strength and fragility of memory. This vision is actually fully supported by the antique props that were curated by designer Rachel Paleo, as well as extraordinary atmospheric lighting designed by Kevin Bowman. All three of these elements taken together make certain moments feel like you're looking at them through a crystal ball or a jewelry case. But by far the biggest contributor to this factor is the costumes designed by Sarah Jean Dowling, a St. Louis theater MVP. There are over 100 costumes in this production, ranging from the Romanov family's textured white royal garments, the dingy working class outfits for the Russians in Leningrad, the textured black and red Bolshevik uniforms, and the flashy fancy dress in Paris. There are a lot of unique looks that make the visual design for all of the characters so memorable, and they were carefully crafted, designed to be changed in and out of in a matter of seconds, particularly for the ensemble, and they were each tailored to fit the cast members' unique body types perfectly. Sarah Jean Dowling pulls off a level of detail in her theatrical costuming that is actually extremely difficult to do, and that is why she is in the Jack Reviews Musicals Hall of Fame. Now, there is one visual element of this production that I would actually levy some pretty heavy criticism against, and that is the projections. On the set, there's a large space on the back wall that's above the band. That's just an empty area where the projections are played out that distinguish between the locations. Now, for one thing, the aesthetic of the projections are pretty cool. They're made to look like old charcoal etchings on yellowed paper, the kind that you would find in an old textbook on Russian history. I actually think that idea is pretty neat and is consistent with the motif of fragile memories. However, what I object to about these projections is that there are very obvious, very unmistakable telltale signs that they were made using generative AI. Now, some of these images were quite convincing. Others, you had to look a little bit harder to tell they were AI, but there were a few that were glaringly obvious. There's letters on signs and flags that looked deformed. There's reflections that don't look the same as their original surface. There's trees that looked too detailed to have been drawn by hand. And overall, there's just a very uncanny valley feel to them. You know they're supposed to be drawings, but they look just a bit too polished, a bit too smooth, and even just straight up wrong looking, to the point of being very distracting. Now, I want to be fully transparent here. I have no insight into what Tesseract's process was like for making these projections, but I honestly don't understand why they would even resort to using AI, even though there are a plethora of illustrators in St. Louis that work in exactly the style that they were going for here. If I were them, I would either commission actual artists to hand draw those illustrations to turn into projections, or even do something really interesting like manipulate stock photos in like different art programs like Photoshop to achieve the same effect. That would have been an interesting experiment. But I think there is one other alternative that's going to sound kind of mean when I say it out loud, and that is to actually not use projections at all. And the reason why I say that is because I honestly don't think Tesseract needed them in the first place. Literally every other element of this production was just so strong. The directing, the choreography, the music, the set, the lights, the costumes, all of them already make the story beats clear as day. You could have just omitted the projections altogether and just used everything else to leave it up to the audience to fill in the blanks.
Haven't you heard of suspension of disbelief?
Now, it is no surprise to anyone who has ever seen a production from Tesseract Theatre, but by far the strongest aspect of Anastasia is the acting, led by Sarah Wilkinson in a strong, star-making performance as Anya. Director Brittany Gunn wanted Anya to be a symbol of female strength, and Sarah Wilkinson perfectly embodies that here. Her Anya has a no-nonsense attitude, displaying a courage and vulnerability that eventually gives way to powerful grace and dignity. Her renditions of In My Dreams, Once Upon a December, and Journey to the Past truly made the most of her incredible voice. Matching Sarah Wilkinson's energy is Aaron Fisher, making his professional theater debut as Dimitri. Now, because Aaron Fisher is so new to professional level musical theater acting, he was actually able to channel Dimitri's spunk pretty convincingly. Fisher makes Dimitri's arc from being this very conniving, frustrated man, all the way to being an earnest gentleman who is so full of love for Anya. Really quite touching. His big songs, My Petersburg and Everything to Win, were excellently delivered, and the chemistry between him and Wilkinson's Anya was very engaging. As always, Kent Koffel is wonderful here as Vlad, displaying not only great physical comedy, but also a shrewd delivery of his dialogue and singing that is as smart as a whip. His dynamic with the other two leads was irresistible, and all three of them worked so well together dramatically. They were a fantastically charming core trio. The antagonist, Gleb, is given a very interesting performance by Donald Kidd. Gleb was written to be a very realistic villain archetype, someone who is following orders for a cause that they strongly believe in. And Donald Kidd interprets Gleb in a way that he allows some cracks to form in his stoic facade. He doesn't make Gleb just this emotionless titan. Donald Kidd uses his voice and body language to truly convey an inner turmoil in this man. He makes it clear through his portrayal that, as a Bolshevik, Gleb is as much a victim of the Soviet-Russian government as the commoners are. His singing in the Neva flows and Still are just as multifaceted as his characterization. Donald Kidd's real-life mother, Kimmy Kidd, plays Lily, a countess who serves as the lady-in-waiting of the Dowager Empress, who treats her new life in Paris as a never-ending party. And Kimmy Kidd gave a very spirited, very light-hearted performance that made her lead in The Land of Yesterday a showstopper, as well as matching Vlad's intrepid energy. In the story, Vlad is revealed to be Lily's long-lost lover, and the dynamic between Kimmy Kidd and Kent Koffel during the song The Countess and the Commoner was a hilarious comic contrast to Anya and Dimitri. But by far the most intense performance from this cast came from Marjorie Handy as the Dowager Empress. Marjorie Handy makes the Empress this truly imposing figure with a regal, stately stiffness, with a stoicism that makes her facade as hard as carapace. And outside of that, Marjorie Handy nails the hurt and the grief that the Empress holds in her heart from the violent loss of her entire family, as well as the frustration and bitterness that comes from constantly being confronted by people who are actively trying to exploit her misery. During the song Close the Door and her eventual confrontation with Anya, you can see on Marjorie Handy's face just how torn apart the Empress is. It's a truly heartbreaking performance that is so good that I was practically on the verge of tears. But the ensemble of this production are truly the ones to commend here. Like, they have the most monumental task in this whole show, zipping across the Marcelle Theatre like crazy people, moving the set pieces, quick changing into costumes within seconds, and creating upwards of 10 distinct characters for each of them. And they all have to have unique voices and personalities. And they have to ace different dancing styles: Russian folk, swing dancing, ballet, and they were phenomenal. Their big featured moments were A Rumor in St. Petersburg, Paris Holds the Key, The Land of Yesterday, and the a cappella number, Stay, I Pray You, full of raw emotion and longing for the way Russia used to be. Their harmonies moved me like nothing else. They were an impressive ensemble, probably the best that Tesseract has ever cast in their larger scale productions. The excellent players consisted of Taylor Cheatham, Scott D. Gets-Fries, Ella Drake, Daniel Feinstein, Julia Gilbert-Gaglio, Lindsay Grosjean, Jalen Hawkins, Stephanie Merritt, Jacob Schmidt, Kelvin Urde, and Devin Phoenix Yakel. Tesseract Theatre's Anastasia is a truly beautiful production. It's a gripping story with exquisite music, performed by a cast at the peak of their powers, augmented by a riveting movement vocabulary and atmospheric visual style that engulfs the Marcelle Theatre full to bursting. It's pretty clear that Tesseract took all of the lessons that they learned from their staging of Kinky Boots and applied them masterfully here. Obviously, it's not perfect all the way through. There's still some lessons they have to learn from this, but Anastasia was a fantastic step in the right direction, and I hope that Tesseract keeps topping themselves from here. If you are a musical theater fan in St. Louis, you are doing yourself a huge disservice by sleeping on Anastasia. I cannot recommend enough that you go out to see this show this weekend. You need to hurry up and get your tickets now before they sell out. And once Tesseract's run is over, I sincerely hope that we are going to get another production of this on the horizon, because Anastasia is a musical that is too good to be underrated. Have you seen Tesseract Theatre's production of Anastasia? If so, what did you think about it? And question of the day, what is your favorite non-Disney animated musical? Whatever it is, whatever you think, comment below and let me know. And while you're at it, be sure to check out my website, jackreviewsmusicals.com, to read my back catalog of written reviews. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss any more St. Louis musical theater reviews coming very soon. Thank you so much to Tesseract Theatre for inviting me to go and see their production, and thank you, the viewer, so much for watching the video. And until next time, long live the musical!